face. Busting makes me feel good.
Hey everybody, welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate movies. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, my friend Hayden Kristal. Hi, Hayden.
Hi, Jay.
Hayden, now, you and I have been trying to do this episode for a little while. Our schedules have finally lined up.
Yeah.
You hit me with a great movie that you wanted to talk about that I saw, and I was like, you know what? This is going to be a great last episode of Blockbusting.
Is this the last episode?
This is
for real?
This is going to be the last official episode, for real.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. This is a great one to send it out.
A great one to send it out on, because I think we're going to argue about this movie way more than I certainly anticipated. Because I thought we were going to be on the same page about how bad the VelociPastor is. But as it turns out, we're not on the same fucking page at all. And that's kind of shocking to me because I thought that we were going to be on the same page about how rad it is. Here's the last note I wrote down is it's crazy that this movie is both boring and stupid.
I am losing my mind because the whole time I was thinking, one of the notes I have written down is we could have written this. This seems like something that we wrote.
I feel like if we wrote this, we would have done a better job.
Obviously, we would give a second pass at the script, right?
Right.
I mean, we could punch it up.
This has got real first draft energy.
But it feels like something that we pitched to one another. Like if you read through our texts, somebody gave us $36,000. This is what we could make.
Here's the premise of the VelociPastor. If you haven't seen it or heard of it, it's a 2017 American comedy horror film written, directed, and edited by Brendan Steer. Pastor Doug Jones becomes infected by an artifact that results in him turning into a velociraptor when he becomes angry. It was originally released in Portland. It made its premiere in 2017. It finally got a wide release in 2019. You can stream it on a bunch of different streaming platforms. And it is bad on purpose, right? Like it is playing into the B movie poorly, throwback, poorly made stuff. And there is some stuff, I will say this, it starts off strong. It starts off very strong.
Yeah. And then it stays strong for the rest of the fucking movie.
That is incorrect. That is unfortunately not correct, Hayden.
Do you know what? I'm really excited today to be the public defender of the people. Not all of us paid a shitload of money to go to fancy film school and hate VelociPastor. So I'm very excited.
This is going to be a battle for the ages, which I think is probably the most fitting way to end Blockbusting.
Yeah.
Hayden, I have got to know, first of all, why did you wind up liking this movie? Because I remember you messaged me about it. You were like, this looks like it's going to be horrific. And you even told me right before we started recording, you thought it was going to be bad. And yet.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be terrible. I thought it was going to be super, self-serious. I thought it was going to, not be in on the joke. I kind of couldn't tell if it was going to be like a schlocky 80s thing, but trying to be art house, or if it was it was going to have some stupid Pure Flix Christian theming under it.
Now that would have been quite a twist.
Yeah, I was really anticipating that and really looking forward to that. But it wasn't. It felt, similar vibes to Wet Hot American Summer for me. It felt like they knew what they were working with and leaned into that, which I really enjoyed.
I can see where you're coming from a little bit, because the movie starts with Catholic priest Doug Jones watching his parents die in a car fire, which you never see the fire. The fire is, every time they cut to it, it says VFX car fire.
Which immediately right off the bat, I was like, oh, this is gonna fuck. This is gonna be fantastic.
I liked that part. I had high hopes when I saw that part. I was like, oh, this is not going to be a bad movie. Even when you start having him run around in a forest that's clearly somewhere in Utah or Oregon or Central California, and it just says China, and then to hit the point home, Doug Jones says China.
China.
Like, that's funny.
It is really funny. I also loved that clearly in that they did forest scenes that were supposed to be like Vietnam and like wherever he's from, like somewhere in the US. I love that they didn't even choose like different parts of the same forest. Like they filmed all of these locations clearly in the same, like probably less than an acre.
Yeah. They only got the permits for one spot in a park. And this was, they had to really use every part of the buffalo.
Yeah.
Now, right around this part, this is where I started to think the movie was actually a bad movie. It was pretty close. It was pretty close after this because he's in China. He comes across ninjas, which, okay. Yep. They are chasing a lady who's got like a raptor claw that turns people into a dragon warrior, which is just a velociraptor, which he doesn't believe in, by the way. Hilarious.
The twist, like when dinosaurs aren't real, that came out of left field.
That was so good.
I had to pause. I was laughing so hard. I mean, I will also say, I think regardless of what you want to say about the rest of the movie, even if it's like, ooh, bougie film school, is that bad? The guy who played Doug was fantastic.
He did a good job. Doug,
he was great.
Gregory James Cohen, solid performance as the titular VelociPastor.
Yes.
But I think this is where we start to diverge because at this point, I'm starting to really, once we leave China and he has the nightmares and you see him back in wherever he is, wherever his home is, and there's all this stuff with Carol and Frankie Mermaid and who's a pimp.
I would watch a full 11 seasons Breaking Bad style anything on Frankie Mermaid. I was devastated when he died. Spoiler alert. Frankie Mermaid, one of my top 5 all-time characters in film and television.
See, here's my problem with Frankie Mermaid. I think Doug Jones as a character, as played by Gregory James Cohen, is in a different movie from Frankie Mermaid. I think that Carol is even in a different movie from Frankie Mermaid to some degree. Like she's sort of straddling both worlds. But there's no... What I liked about this movie was that it was playing everything really straight for a while. However, there was this obvious element of ridiculousness of like, oh, we're going to make it bad on purpose. We're going to lean into the jokiness of the premise. And then you have characters like Frankie Mermaid who are just overtly jokes the whole time instead of leaning into being somebody who seems real as opposed to like, oh, we got the best improviser in Portland to play Frankie Mermaid and just say a bunch of ridiculous lines.
That's fair. That's a fair critique. I mean, I do feel like, no, you do. I'm going to be fair and like, I'm going to concede points while also knowing that I fundamentally will not be shifted from my position that VelociPastor. I also feel like, to state my credits, I did not go to film school. I do not like movies. I think that's not a bit. I just think they're too long and I don't like them.
That's true. We've talked about this before. You're not a big movie person at all.
No, I don't like them. And it's not an ironic thing, but more and more people have been agreeing with me lately that movies are too long. The one exception to that, which is also, I think it's funny, I didn't do this on purpose, but I love Jurassic Park. It's the only thing I'll go see in theaters. I love all the Jurassic Parks.
Even the new ones.
Yeah. And my dad's a big movie guy and he's like, Hayden, why do you have to go see this one in theaters? And I'm like, because it's new. And I don't know he's like, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think the dinosaurs are going to get out and cause a ruckus? I don't know. That's why I have to go see it in theaters. So the VelociPastor theme, you know, I think that if you look at it together with the other films that I enjoy, a theme starts to emerge.
No,
but
I gotta ask you this: which of the Jurassic Parks do you feel like would make the best double feature with the VelociPastor?
well, probably the original. I think the original, because I think that the original was working with some similar constraints, and I feel like at some point it does embrace the hokiness of it and like leans into that more than some of the later ones do. I think the later ones are trying to be more badass action film, whereas I feel like the original one, there were points where they let that, like, we know this is silly, kind of slip through.
Yeah, you've got your Newmans of the world.
Exactly.
There is some silliness in the original Jurassic Park that does sort of fall away as we get deeper and deeper down into the VelociPastor. Or into the rest of the franchise. Excuse me, because I'm thinking also, this is, like I said, this is my big problem with the movie, is that it started out very fun and silly, and then it seemed like it wasn't silly enough to maintain the momentum that it was building up, but it also wasn't exciting enough to merit me latching onto and caring about this movie in any real way, or any of the characters in any sort of like semi-real way. But I'm willing to hear your, like, what is your thesis about this movie, Hayden? Why is this movie, where did it surprise you? Where did it come out and go, hey, you know what? This is actually more worth your time than you banked on it being. I
just was not expecting, I mean, you know, comics, we don't laugh at anything. Like,
That's
you know,
true.
A joke was really good if that was so fucking funny. Like, that's the strongest. But I laughed at this. There were so many lines that came out of nowhere that I was like, this is so funny and so solid. Like when Father Stewart's love interest explodes when she steps on a landmine in Vietnam.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And explodes. And then like 2 seconds, like, he's standing there covered in this like mist of her blood and flesh and organs. And one of the other soldiers goes, I think she's too far gone. There's nothing we can do for her. That, I had to pause. I was laughing so hard. There was just some really good lines that came out. And again, I agree with you that there wasn't a ton of emotional investment. Like I wasn't watching because I was like desperate to see what happened.
Sure.
With like Doug Jones. It's not like, God, I hope he makes it or whatever.
I hope he and Carol reconcile and those two crazy kids work it out.
Right. But like more because I kept being surprised by how funny it was. The bits strewn throughout were so good and so surprising that I paid attention.
Have you ever seen sort of a tangent, but it makes sense. Have you ever seen Black Dynamite?
I have not.
Okay. I think what this movie is doing is done in a much better and more polished version in the film Black Dynamite. So Black Dynamite is this movie. I think it came out in 2014. It might be a little bit earlier than that. I'm going to double check that actually. But it is a parody blaxploitation film. Oh, sorry. It's even earlier than that. It's 2009.
Oh, wow.
And it's got basically, it's bits all the way through. It's pure comedy all the way through. It's leaning into this era pastiche of like 1970s blaxploitation filmmaking, and action filmmaking specifically of that time as well. But there's no there's no winking, right? It's all deadly. It all plays deadly serious. Everybody is really being as serious as possible. And I think that there are moments in VelociPastor where that does happen. Like I am talking with you about it again. I am remembering like, oh yeah, that scene with the landmine is very funny because you have the soldier afterwards going, I think she's too far gone, man. Like that's great.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I agree. I think that there are obviously technical limitations. Like I think it's so funny because some of their shots are super nice. Like some of them are really beautiful. Anytime it's handheld, like they're like, did the guy have Parkinson's? Like, what are they doing? There was so much like Blair Witch, like shaking. It's so much so that like the framing in the woods when like Carol and Doug are running through the woods the first time, like they're just not in some of those. It's shaking so much. Like they get their heads cut off. But like even that, like he needs clothes to wear and he comes out in this like
in the dress.
Like the neon orange mini dress. So funny.
That's funny.
I laughed. It is really funny. I think that like I understand and I see what you're saying. The overall story was not coherent enough to make it as like it's like to make me super invested in it and the story as an overall arc. It worked for me as more like a bunch of skits.
I think, yeah. But that's I feel like I wish that it had more, not that it had more like story to it. Like, I actually think it needs less story. I think that the less is going to be way more with this kind of a movie, because you don't need to clutter it up with all this extra stuff about like weird Chinese Christian drug dealing ninjas.
And see,
just let the VelociPastor be out there killing all the pimps and saving all of Carol's prostitute friends.
I do agree. Boy, we should pitch this as a limited series. Like, just like
VelociPastor: The Reckoning.
Yeah. I would watch, film anybody who wants to get in contact with us. See, and that's the thing that I kept thinking, is that this seemed like something that we would pitch and write. And I was excited to talk about it with you because Jay and I have specifically discussed our love of parody.
Yes.
We both are huge fans of parody. And I think that a lot of parts of this film did parody super well.
I agree. And I totally agree with you on that.
But I also can see your point and concede your point that, like, as one cohesive thing, maybe should have narrowed the scope a little bit. I did love the hard left into the guardrail and diverting into like a Vietnam War film, like 3/4 of the way through, with the only like monologue, like the only internal monologue that we get in the entire thing being from the side character who then immediately dies. I loved that. I think
I'd already checked out of the movie by the time that happened.
When it's like when they're going to the seance and Father Stewart has like the only monologue, the only voiceover monologue in the entire thing is Father Stewart talking about Vietnam and his time there.
I remember it sort of happening a little bit. Like I remember, because there's, but that's the thing. It's like I said, this movie it's got so much going on that it was like even hard for a simple movie that could have just been a guy who's a pastor who turns into a velociraptor and is a crime fighter of some kind. There's all these like extra montages that we don't need. There's these extra bits and bobs thrown in that we don't need. We don't need to go have an exorcism necessarily. Like, I get why we're doing it. I get what I understand, like, you know, if we're trying to lean into like the Christianity of it all. Yeah, you probably want to try and exorcise the demon that is turning you into a velociraptor. But like, do we need to have extra bits in there diluting the plot of the movie? I don't know.
I think that what Jay is saying is that this movie would have been significantly better had it been 6 to 8 hours long and they had been able to give justification to each of those.
It's either that, Hayden. It's either they make it 6 to 8 hours long. We go full Showa with this movie and make it as long as possible and give everybody a plot line. We go full P.T. Anderson Magnolia, which is another movie that I don't like, by the way. I think this movie is Magnolia is only marginally better than the VelociPastor. That's going to be my hot take for the day.
Okay.
But I do think that if the VelociPastor, it needed to either be 75 minutes, but like a completely different focus, or 6 to 8 hours long, full-on miniseries. Everybody is going to do their Rashomon style. Like, we're going to see everybody's side of the story.
Yeah. And to be clear to anybody listening who wants to fund that, I will watch it. I will watch it enough that it will make it worth whatever money you invested into it. I also was fascinated to see that the budget was $36,000 because somehow it felt like significantly more and significantly less.
Yes, it is really, they really made a meal of that 36 grand.
Yeah.
They did a lot of, like, I love the practical effects usage. I do think that you're doing everything right, the more chances you have to like have an insane amount of blood and gore in your silly grindhouse movie. It's a great call.
Yeah, I thought the practical effects and leaning into that was super funny. Like, I love the shots where he's ripping people's heads off and it's just clearly a mannequin, like full on, not even disguised. Like, they just do a full on like center frame shot of the mannequin head with like, it's got to be like wig hair glued on to be eyebrows. I also love that they use the same mannequin head over and over and over again. I think that's what I enjoyed about it, is like, just there was so much of it to me that really spoke to my sense of humor. I also I love bits that you don't acknowledge. And I feel like
this is another thing we have talked about before. This movie is entirely a bit that was done for themselves. Yeah.
Which I mean, again, it seems like we have talked about like just stupid show pitches. Like we pitch them to each other and it's so much fun. And this seems like something that we like, just a joke that's gone on for far too long between the two of us, and somebody gave someone almost $40,000 to make it. But like the bit at the end, like when he is no longer a pastor and he's suddenly like a greaser, so funny. Why? And then at the end, like, it's just him and Carol by this Chevelle. Like, that's so funny. They don't acknowledge it. They don't mention it. It's just a background bit. So funny. The same thing with like all of the forest clearly being the same place, despite them labeling it different places. Extremely funny. Like the eye patch that Father Stewart comes back with an eye patch after being mauled by a velociraptor. That's his only injury. He's just got an eye patch now and it's never addressed. Love it. Like 100% into that. Yeah, sure. I think it's so funny.
I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that's what kept me paying attention too, is that I was like, there were so many of those really funny background bits that like I feel like are things you just pitch in a writer's room or with other writers to make yourselves laugh, even if you know that they're never going to be seen. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's got a ton
of great visual jokes in there.
Yeah. I loved it.
It's so silly to me that this is a movie that like defies criticism in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, because I know I sound like a pretentious film school kid whenever I criticize this movie, because it's sort of Teflon critically. Like, if you're seriously looking at a movie called The VelociPastor and going, well, there's no emotional arc to the storytelling, like, you're gonna sound like a lunatic. And then if you also like designing a movie that is bad on purpose and leaning into the B moviness of it all, it's genius. It's genius filmmaking in a way.
Yeah. I was like, you're right. I mean, 100% right. Because there's no way. I read some of the reviews and I was like, there's no way. None of the criticism stuck for me, because anytime somebody was like, "Ooh, this isn't like This is what I was like, oh, well, I can't believe you went into this expecting that. Maybe I just enjoyed it because my expectations were on the floor. Like,
see, that's the thing. I think I came into this with higher expectations than you did. Like, I thought it was going to be fun, and I just didn't have nearly as much fun as I was hoping to have while watching it. Like, this is the crazy thing too, is like, I'm reading the bad reviews from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, and even the critics are like, man, it's fun.
yeah.
Like, it's bad, but it's a fun bad. And I found myself, like I said, like I was bored, which is crazy because this movie should not be boring.
No, I mean, I would say that maybe is more a reflection on you then. That maybe is something.
Wow.
That maybe you were
Caught me.
bored by a movie called The VelociPastor? What?
I know. I didn't think I was going to be bored by the VelociPastor, but all of these montages, all of this like this stuff where nothing is really happening in a movie that's 75 minutes long, you got to have less fat on the bone than that.
That's true. I do feel like my girlfriend and I watched it together, and we were watching the sex scene montage, which I thought was I love that they used like the same like After Effects or whatever template for both of the montages in this movie for the workout montage, the exact same template. But yes. I did think the template I thought the sex scene was really well done for like the first 2 minutes. And then my girlfriend was like, do you think they just like, they paid them to use the full song? She's like, do you think that's what it was? They had to contractually use the entire song? Because that did stretch on. I understand what you're saying. There were scenes that were too long. I also feel like there were some jokes and bits and that I think would have benefited a lot from just being snappier cuts. Like, not that I know anything, but like, except that I make a ton of TikToks, but like I make videos for social media, and it's, you're working with under a minute. So those cuts have to be snappy.
Right.
And
I think there's a lot of I will give this movie some credit on some of the like the longer scenes where the camera sort of lingers for a while or like moves up, like somebody literally knocked the camera off of its lock on the tripod. Yeah. Sometimes it works because it's panning up so you can see that they've left the boom in the shot just for the joke of like, oops, there's a boom in the shot. But sometimes it just sits there for another like 10, 20, 30 seconds and nothing additional happens to make us laugh. Yeah. And I'm just like, why did you leave the scene that long? Yeah.
I think that that could have been tightened up. That was a major criticism I had, is that there was some editing things. And I didn't feel like, and again, from my very layperson perspective, I didn't feel like there was a ton editing wise, like just in terms of the actual editing of the film that they got. I didn't feel like there was a ton that I really hated. But I do feel like it lingered, and especially some of like the reverse shot stuff, it was just too long between dialogue. And it took me out of it a little bit. It really broke the realism for me, broke immersion in VelociPastor.
There you go. Now you don't need to go to film school to say that the realism was broken for you.
Yeah, and my suspension of disbelief.
I'm proud that I have osmosed my pretension to you over this Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and thank you for making me a worse person by proxy.
I'm happy to provide. I do think it is also notable that this movie has sort of spawned a kind of reaction from the public, where so many people are very obviously like ironically loving this movie and leaving really good reviews that are absolutely insane and jokey, and also some really bad reviews that are absolutely insane and jokey. And I did have to dig really hard because I want to hear what you think of some of these bad reviews that are actually bad. Like I had to dig to find some of these.
Okay.
So we've got some reviews from some people who legitimately were upset by having to watch this movie. And I'm not talking people who are like Kermit Froggerson, who gave this 1 star on Google. Said, me, my wife, Miss Piggy, and my nephew Robin went to see this movie, and I'm in utter outrage. The CGI detail, everything was so realistic. This is the goriest, most brutal movie ever. This is not the kind of review that I'm highlighting here.
Yeah. I will say though that it was significantly gorier than I was anticipating.
I think it is the exact right amount of like jokey gore. It's a good
I agree.
level of comedic gore.
Yeah. I also thought the idea that she, like the ending where Carol nearly died and then she's in like a like dentist smock in a like a pediatrician's office at the end. So
and that's funny. How she's okay.
She's fine.
Here's a review, a 1-star review from Kai Diha. 1 star. I don't know what you guys take before watching this movie, but you should throw it away. Wow. This movie is garbage, from the acting to the camera work to the props to the very plot itself. There is no exaggeration when I say that I can feel my brain cells dying while watching this. The only reason I'm writing this, because the way everyone praised this movie so highly feels so wrong to me. The praise they mention aren't true at all, much so that I bet they were paid to write these positive comments.
Well, I will go ahead and be the first to say it that I have made $0 off of VelociPastor. I am an organic. Are you writing these all up in response to?
I am typing this up so I can respond to Kai. No, I'm just looking at more reviews.
Okay. No, I was not paid. I will earnestly disagree with that. I think even if you went into, like, if you enjoy this ironically, which I don't, by the way, I legit had a great time watching this. I thought that the acting was pretty good. I thought that Doug was great. I thought that Frankie Mermaid was probably, you're right, the funniest improv person in Portland. I thought the acting was really good. There were a bunch of people where I'm like, I would love to see you do something else. Like I would watch another thing if you were in it, because I thought that they were great. I did think Carol to me was the weak link, and I don't know if it's what she was given. But some of her delivery was a little off. I will say her like physical comedy I thought was pretty good. I thought for the budget that they were working on, there were a lot of props where I was like, I wrote down at one point when they had like the porcelain tea set, I was like, I wonder if like someone's mom just let them use that, because I was like, these were well sourced for, I feel like, the budget that they had. I like, if you're gonna bitch about the like mannequin head as a prop in the movie, then I feel like you just didn't get it. Like, if you're gonna be mad that this low budget parody of a B horror movie and also a bunch of other movies like didn't have great like super expensive visual and practical effects, then I don't know what to tell you.
I think that's a great point. I think those are several great points, Hayden. And I think that hopefully Kai listens to this and realizes the error of their ways. Now, this is one other. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying they've got a Google alert for VelociPastor good reviews.
Yes. This is another, a little bit more earnest one from Mary Manzel. 1 star on Amazon. Not so good. Not so bad. It's good. Just bad. Don't waste your time. Tried to be campy, but not skilled enough. The writer-director watched Kung Fu Hustle and Evil Dead one too many times and thought, I can make a good bad movie. Let me assure you, they could not. It's not that this is cheap or campy. It's that it's bad. It's trying way too hard to be clever without the depth of skill, knowledge, wisdom, or experience it takes. I'm sure that the creator takes every bad review as a compliment of, haha, they just missed that I was trying to make a bad movie, but that's not it. They may have thought they were doing that, but what they actually did was write a bad, insulting, and sometimes racist script, then layer on cheap FX and over-the-top acting moments to try to play the so bad it's good card.
I will say that as soon as the phrase China came up on the screen, I was like, uh-oh.
Yes.
I'll also say that obviously I don't think my opinion is the most valuable here. And again, maybe this is an expectations versus reality thing. There was nothing. What I will say is there was nothing in it that I interpreted as glaringly racist.
I agree with that. I didn't interpret anything as glaringly racist. I was like, you know what? They're clearly making ninjas in China as a joke.
Right. Also,
It's
like
obvious.
the fact, I will say that the most diverse casting was in the ninjas, which I thought was very funny.
Yes.
But I think that, I mean, I guess it depends on what you want to get out of something, like a piece of media. Like, what are you looking for it to do for you? And I had no expectations going in. This made me laugh so hard. And I guess if the thing about that review is it doesn't really say specifically what they felt was bad. They just thought everything was bad. And I'm like, if you are like, I think that your criticism, I'm more willing to accept because you said, hey, this is something that I was looking to get out of this that it didn't provide. I think this is where it could have done better. But like that review, you didn't laugh at all. You didn't think anything is funny because there's some shit in there that we are both professional comedy writers. Like they're objectively funny things in that movie. And for me, I felt like all the way throughout.
There's at certain points in reading some of these reviews, it feels like I think you hit the nail on the head with the notion of what are you trying to get out of this? What are you trying to get out of this as a piece of media? What are you trying to get out of this as a piece of hashtag content? And I think there are certainly people who go into a movie or a TV show or a YouTube or whatever, and they're thinking, well, this is going to be bad, but we'll have a good time watching it. Or this is going to be good and silly, and we'll have a good time watching it. And it sounds like what happened here was old Mary got so caught up in being upset with the bad parts that she was unable to look at the legitimately good comedic parts with anything other than just like arms crossed disdain.
Yeah, and I just don't get that. I mean, I wasn't expecting to come out of this like feeling changed as a person. Like
No, me either.
I was just looking, and I think what I really, if I had to pin down what I thought was going to happen, is I thought it would have been taking itself seriously, and I thought it would have been like stupid, and I would have laughed at it, but I was laughing with it throughout. Like, and I don't know, I mean, just like, oh, as somebody who writes comedy, I don't know if I just like was looking for that and saw it and acknowledged it, and that like put me in a good mood. Like if it set me up to look for the positives in it, because I was like, oh, this writing is legitimately deliberately funny, and I respect their craft, like as a fellow person who writes comedy bits. But I think, I mean, I guess that's what is good entertainment at all. Like if you go into it looking for something specifically and you get that thing, or if you go into it and get more than what you were expecting.
Right. I mean, that's really at the end of the day, like I started doing this podcast at the very, very beginning of the time because I was like, I was intrigued to hear why people didn't like certain things.
Yeah.
And the specific reasons, because art is subjective. No matter how anybody tries to skin like a movie or a TV show can feel important and like be a cultural landmark, but there's still going to be people out there who don't like it. And there's still going to be people out there who love bad stuff too. Yeah.
And I get that, and I see I mean, I'm glad that you have this podcast because I totally see the value of that, especially in sometimes like as somebody who just doesn't like movies. I get that. Like,
Uh-huh.
and we've talked about like horror movies too.
And they're
Which
analogs with comedy for sure.
Yeah, which I think you can see really clearly here in VelociPastor. But I also, something I do that people don't like is that I really like horror movies. I will not watch one unless I've read a beat by beat plot synopsis beforehand and decided that I want to invest my time in it. I also don't like jump scares. So I want to read a beat by beat plot synopsis. But my pretentious argument back is that like a story shouldn't have to rely on like cheap twists to keep me invested in it. Like if I'm just watching because I don't know what's going to happen, like the story should be able to stand up like on a whole. So there's a lot of stuff that I feel like people have had really strong positive reactions to that I ended up not liking because I obviously knew what the twist was going to be because I read the plot synopsis. But like, I don't know. I just, especially for this film, like, and I totally valid if you don't like something, whatever, but to go into this, I guess I just don't understand what you could leave that, like, what expectations did Mary have that were not met by this film?
Yeah. How were your expectations at all high for this film, Mary? How could you have entered this with anything other than like close to the bottom of the barrel expectations?
Especially because I thought it was legitimately funny and not in a like, oh, haha kind of.
Wow, look at how
like,
bad this is funny. Like, it's funny.
Yeah, no, it's legitimately funny, and it's legit. It's not like there's one or two good jokes. I thought it was legitimately funny throughout. Like the joke density could have been significantly higher, but I think that there were enough of them that I would consider it throughout the entire movie. It was funny.
I agree. And I think from a comedy standpoint, that's really all you can ask for. And I think that this is a good, we've leveled the playing field, Hayden. You and I, even though we've come in on different grounds,
I agree.
Different loves, we found some balance in the world.
We did.
And there's
just
nothing,
like Doug.
Just like Doug.
Yeah.
Just like Doug, who didn't believe in dinosaurs until he became one and had to believe in himself.
That bit took me out. I maybe because I thought this was going to come in having some like pro-Christianity skew to it, which it absolutely does not. It was more a Book of Mormons, but for Christians with the Velociraptor, I feel like. Which is funny because it had kind of a Matt and Trey type. Have you seen Cannibal the Musical?
Never.
Another fantastic film, but it felt like that, like very similar vibes to me.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, Cannibal. It's fantastic. It was their student thesis film, I think.
Yeah, before South Park.
Yeah, before everything. It's a great movie, extremely funny, but it had the same kind of mean-spirited, kind of a lot of throwaway jokes, a lot of background jokes, a lot of a parody, a lot of like exaggeration, and I don't know. I thought it was great. I was surprised by. I was worried it was going to be very like he overcomes this Velociraptor urges because he's a great Christian, but it did not appear to be that.
I'm also as glad as you are that it did not go down that route. So thank you, Brendan Steer. And you know what? Hayden, there is a sequel to this movie coming out. They have already talked about this and confirmed.
I'm so excited.
So maybe whenever it does come out, we'll sit down together, digitally or in person, and watch the VelociPastor 2.
Do you think that they're hiring? The only better credit than working full in VelociPastor would be VelociPastor 2. That's a funnier credit. Just like when Doug is reading his books when he's gets caught and he tries to cover them with a Bible. The book he's reading is called Crime 2.
I missed this part.
See, if you had been paying attention, you would have realized how fucking funny this movie is.
Look,
he's reading two books. One of them is called All About Dinosaurs, and book number 2 is just called Crimes 2.
I wish that this movie hadn't put me to sleep so I could have appreciated more of its jokes.
Again, I feel like at this point it's a you problem. Like, you can't not give your full attention to this movie and then say it sucked. That's like me like falling asleep 2 minutes into Jaws and being like, there was no fucking shark in this thing. What's wrong with it? I don't get why everybody liked it so much.
It took 350 some odd episodes to have the perfect distillation of the show, which is at this point it seems like a you problem, but that's really all I'm trying to accomplish.
You should rebrand and come back at this point. Actually, that's not a bad idea for a show. At this point, it seems like a you problem.
It seems like a you problem. The podcast. Yeah. Hayden, thank you so much for being my final guest on Blockbusting, and the listeners obviously should check out your stuff. Where can they do that?
I am all over social media. It's all my full name, Hayden. Kristal. My last name is pronounced like the meth, but spelled like a stripper, so it's easy to remember.
Perfect.
Yeah.
If you want, you can follow at Blockbusting Pod on all the social media platforms. It's still going to exist. I'm not taking that away. There may still be clips coming out from time to time of old episodes and stuff.
Who is they? You said they're not taking that away. Who is they?
The internet moguls.
Okay. Okay. I just wanted to double check.
I don't know if you knew this, because when a podcast ends, normally Mark Zuckerberg comes directly to your house and goes, "Hey, you can't have a platform on my app Instagram anymore."
He old yellers, yeah.
He old yellers me. He shoots my podcast in the back in the back of the barn.
Yeah, because it has rabies.
Yeah, but not this time. No.
Yeah.
And please subscribe to the YouTube channel. The old episodes are going to start going up archived there. I'll do a separate episode that will explain all of this, so you don't have to listen to me waffle on at the end of this show. Follow me at Diet J on all the other socials. And Hayden,
you should. He's very funny.
I appreciate you, and I'm very excited to put this podcast to bed with you digitally by my side.
Yay! I'm so happy I could help you murder your brainchild.
We're old yellering this thing together.
Yay! Oh, that's all I've ever wanted. I love helping people euthanize their dying media outlets.
Oh,
good.
How sweet.
Yeah.
Folks, this has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.